Mr. Chairman, to YouTube is live.
Thank you. I will call to order the Senate Appropriations Committee meeting. It's a beautiful January day in Cheyenne, Thursday, February 2nd, 2023, 8 a.m. Clerk will please call the roll.
Senator Anderson.
Here.
Senator Carew.
Here.
Senator Nethercott. Senator Salzar and Chairman Kinsky.
Here. Committee members, we have a number of re-referrals here. And you know what, Linda, I'm not seeing Senator Hutchings, and one of her bills is here. It's Hutchings, Dockstetter.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
question. I see the good director of revenues here, and I rode up with her on the elevator, and I think she's here for House Bill 3. What was the disposition on that?
It's gonna be postponed till next week. House Bill 3, we're out of deference to Senator Case, who could not be here. We're going to postpone it. Thank you, Senator Garreau. Thank you very much. Thanks for that catch.
That Hutchings one's the last bill.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to, let's go ahead. And so what I thought of fellow committee members is that we might try something we've not done before, which is a consent list. And the rationale for that is some of these, it's good that every expenditure comes in front of us. Some of them, though, are not so consequential that we need to spend 20 minutes on the bill. And so let me suggest this for your consideration. Senate File 133 is a $30,000 annual appropriation for creation of a commission that gets per diem and mileage. This is student eligibility in interscholastic sports. Clearly, that's something that's going to come up in front of the body, but I don't think that's so consequential. We need to spend a lot of time on the bill. And then Senate File 153, election security, is $100,000 one time for training of county election clerks. Senate File 138 is a one-time $18,000 to update the state's computers for unemployment insurance. And then 107, which is acquisition, exchange, and sale of state trust lands. It's the fiscal note says unknown. It says if lands are exchanged or sold, might be an increase, might be a decrease. I don't know what we would do with that one. So I would propose.
What's that last one? Say House Bill 107?
Senate File 107.
Senate?
Yeah, take a look at that fiscal
I
note.
don't see it either. Sorry.
That's all right. What else were you missing?
Oh, 107.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I get it.
So Jim, then do you have 133,
Yep. 150.
153,
138.
and 107?
Yeah.
And if you give me a minute, if you take a look at that fiscal note, it's just indeterminate because they don't know how the bill's going to go. It's either going to increase revenue or decrease depending on what lands are exchanged or sold. So I guess I would propose those four as a consent list. What do you think?
I like it. Yeah.
Okay.
Second, whatever.
Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion. Okay, Linda, I think we can call the roll once on all four.
All right. Senator Anderson.
Aye.
Senator Carew.
Aye.
Senator Salzar and Chairman Kinsky.
Aye. Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Let me know when the meeting starts. I'll help you out.
So then, committee members, House Bill 3 Senator cases, we're going to push till next week. And Linda, don't let us get out of here without us talking about when we're going to meet next week. The ones we're prime on are HB 24 state investments, HB 51 legislator contingent service allowance, and 181 online sports wagering amendments. So we are the first and only committee to consider those. Is there a preference? Let's go ahead and take 24 state investments, compensation and relocation investments. It's HB 24. And I saw some agencies here, so I thought we'd jump to that one, let them get about their day. Okay, there, we have an amendment here. A proposed amendment. So let's go ahead and open it up to agency comment. This was a select committee on capital finance and investments, and we are the home committee for their legislation. So this bill comes to us to sponsor or not. Good morning, Mr. Swindell.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Don Williams is here from Treasury, and I think they're trying to. Pat, fine, we're gonna zoom in. So would you like to start with retirement or Treasury, Mr. Chairman? This bill affects the investment staffs of both entities.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and start with WRS.
Very good, since I'm already on the podium. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, good morning. It's Groundhog Day, and it is a beautiful day in February. Thank you very much. This is House Bill 24. It was worked by the Capital and Finance Committee. It has gone through the House. It was 7-0 from your House compatriots on the Appropriations Committee, and it passed out of the House 48-12-1. The 12 votes, I suppose, we'll talk about some of the issues here. On its face, it's not a complicated issue. It's the legislature regulates the wages of the investment professionals in both the Treasury and the retirement system. We have 7 such individuals. They are been their maximum base pay has been limited by a budget footnote. This bill reorganizes a little bit and authorizes an increase from those levels that were established back in 2019. And some of those levels actually codified salaries that have been in place since, well, in one individual's case, since 2016. The situation with the salaries is this bill increases the maximum base pay authorized by 20%. And it also adds an allowance for relocation of up to $10,000. The amendment that the chairman mentioned was to make sure they had to stay at least 2 years. Otherwise, they would repay that back. That was the source of the amendment. And it authorizes a little bit of change in performance compensation. Because other than base pay, starting in 2019, the legislature adopted a performance pay program whereby these 7 individuals and the related individuals in Treasury can earn a performance in addition to their base pay if their investment performance exceeds established benchmarks according to the plan. The bill does have a cost to it. If we were to raise all the salaries as much as indicated, along with a benefit allowance, the increase in wages and benefits is $274,000 for retirement. I think we allocated $10,000 for one potential relocation, so you get the $284,000. The situation with pay in the investment community is that the purpose of the bill is just to maintain our competitiveness in base pay. According to market surveys, we did one with CBiz in December 2022. Our average base pay of these positions, we're at 74.2% of market median, which means we are paying 25.8% below the published survey market median. And the performance pay is also a percentage of your base. So if we don't maintain the base wages, then we're not going to maintain competitiveness in either component of the compensation. And there's another survey that you may have referred to in the past, the Aon McLaughlin survey. I could quote some numbers, but it's broadly consistent. Base pay is lagging the market in bottom quarter or worse. Performance compensation helps. It gets us closer to median. But in the end, we have to maintain base pay in order to maintain that situation. So the bill's intent is to raise base pay by 20% to bring us closer to market median and enable the performance compensation to continue to maintain its role in the compensation system. I would remind the senators that competitive compensation is the key to stability and investment performance. With a $10 billion fund, 50 basis points is about $50 million. And compounded over 10 years, that's $100 million. And if you have 50 basis points every year and you compound that, that's like $781 million over 10 years. The team's performance has been very good. In September of 2022, we were down 7.5%, but the median fund was down 10.5%. We were in the peer rankings, we were in the 12th percentile. That's huge. Even in a losing year, if you lose less money, that means when the market recovers, you will do much better.
Was that 2022?
Yes, sir.
So is the 12th percentile amongst all sovereign wealth funds?
That is a market analysis from our consultant, which compares us to 59 peer public pension funds with assets over $1 billion. So it's a group of 59.
Okay, so that's the WTO is not in that number.
That's WRS.
Right.
Right. And I would just remind this committee, Mr. Chairman, that it wasn't always so. Back in 2008, in the great financial crisis, WRS was down 30%, but the median fund was only down 26.9%. That's a 3.1% delta, and that represents hundreds of millions of dollars. And if we had had that and compounded that over 14 years, I figure that's more like $750 million. And in the recovery, we didn't recover as fast as other funds. In 2011,
Before you go, Dave, before you go too far and too fast, give me the number, 0.5% on what? You said 50 bips on what?
$10 billion.
On 10 billion over 10 years is what?
$100 million, roughly.
Okay.
In other words, if it's 50 million, it'll basically be twice that in 10 years if you compound it at the assumed rate of return of the system.
So I'll let the other board members weigh in, but if you overwhelm us with too many numbers, we'll get confused.
Very good.
Because when we go to the floor, we're going to need one page because you've seen our floor and how it's greeted pay hikes so far.
Right. Well, I suppose that is the political challenge here. If it was any other industry, any other situation, you'd say, yeah, you're paying in the bottom quarter for people that are important to your operation, that are key to it. Of course, you want to maintain base pay. It wouldn't be a hard business decision, right? Well, the only difference is that these salaries are larger than most public employees, right? I'm going to quote you a few comments from an article that appeared in Pension and Investments magazine on 9 January 2023, just a couple of weeks ago. Pension pay staff needs less politics. It may be politically unpopular to say this, but the investment staff at public pensions should be paid more, much more. Public pensions should pay market compensation in order to enhance investment performance and retain key staff. That is what CalPERS is trying to do. That is what Canadian pensions do, and what all U.S. public pension plans should do. A study recently from the Pension Research Council at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania concluded that higher pay for an investment staff can increase investment performance by about 0.5 percentage point. That's about $50 million on a fund of our size per year. That's significant money to be put back into the pockets of taxpayers. The outrage should not be that public investment staffs are paid too much. It should be that they are paid not enough. And I think that's the issue. And I suppose in the end, I understand the issues here. And no analogy is perfect, Mr. Chairman, but I'll just nominate college football. College coaches' salaries are really high. But to maintain a competitive football program, you have to pay the freight. Salaries amongst football coaches in the Mountain West Conference are more than $1 million a year. And Wyoming is not paying in the bottom quartile of our conference. We're in the top. And that's what's necessary to maintain a competitive football program. And the same thing is true in the investment staffs. The salaries are large, but you have to stay competitive if you want to stay in the game. But the game here is much more serious than football wins and losses. It's millions of dollars for both the Treasury and for the retirement system. So I strongly urge your aye vote.
Senator Salazar.
Mr. Chairman. So I've been one of those individuals that have been having a hard time with pay increases. Okay, and you're looking at 20% here. But on the reverse side, I think I'd even be more generous than most people on performance salaries. You're dealing with a position where there's a large sum of money. So if an individual is performing incredibly well, I would have no problem if their compensation equated to $1 million a year, if they could give us an incredible return. I think they deserve that. So I guess my philosophy is whether, it's like a football coach in professional sports. If you're going to win the Super Bowl, man, you should get one heck of a bonus. Results. And I'm just wondering, in your mechanism of how you compensate people who have been given those positions where they can bring back an incredible rate of return for the state, if we have not looked at allowing them to go way beyond the normal salary, if they can perform at a much higher level than others who don't have the responsibility of investing money for the state. Have you ever thought of a salary scale that would allow that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Salazar, that topic has been a big topic over the years. And the result of all those discussions was the adoption of performance pay in 2019 by the legislature. Each of these 7 positions can earn a percentage of their base pay if they perform well and beat established benchmarks. It varies by the position. The chief investment officer can double his salary if we earn enough money. The senior investment officers can earn a 75% bonus, if you will. The investment officer can earn 50%, and the analyst can earn 25% of their salary. And one of the provisions in this bill is to raise that to 35%, because that is one area where all the surveys say we're actually even less competitive than we are with the senior ranks.
And that's on page 2, line 17, Senator Salazar.
So we do have a performance package. It is, however, tied to base pay. It's a percentage bonus of what your base is. And that's why it's important to maintain the base as well.
Please.
So what's the results? Have they exceeded their limit? I mean, have people doubled or reached 75% in their performance over the last couple of years?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Salazar, the answer is yes. Over the last 4 years since, 3 years actually, since it was implemented, the system, we've earned $550 million over the benchmark. And then we have paid out, more than $1 million in bonuses as a result. So the team has done well. We've had pretty good stability. We've only lost one investment professional since the performance pay program was implemented. So we don't have a really good number of recruitments to talk about. We only did one. But I do think, well, actually we did 2. It was just before performance pay. It was working its way through the legislature. The existence of that program, I do believe, was key in the recruitment of both of those positions. And it was a way, I think, to raise pay, total compensation closer to median, which the legislature was uncomfortable doing unless it was tied to performance, as you alluded to.
So let me recap what I have. It's our bill, but we've got an education job to do out on the floor. The key points I have here, competitive salary is key to long-run investment performance. 50 bips on 10 billion is 100 million over 10 years. Current performance is in the 12th percentile out of 59 peer pension funds. But the salary survey shows that we're paying in the bottom quarter, and this bill raises base by 20%. Okay. The bottom quarter, is that just the base, or is that base plus performance?
Mr. Chairman, that's base.
Okay,
If you
that's base.
include the performance pay, we're closer to median.
Okay,
Which
close.
is why the performance pay was absolutely important, but that's also why it's important to maintain the base pay going forward.
And you've lost some personnel,
We lost one of the 7,
and that was a key
an
position-
analyst,
An analyst, and they went for
to the University of Wyoming Foundation.
Oh, well, that's not right. Okay,
We provide intellectual talent for the state.
so I suspect we're going to need. I don't want too much paper for the floor, but I know we're going to get a question about what this performance compensation plan looks like and what targets they have to hit. I would think, I don't know, Senator Nethercott.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And if I missed this, my apologies. One question I have is, and I realize I'm on Cap Fin, but I find a great deal of this being in statute inappropriate. And so curious to hear kind of responses to that, as opposed to if you want to have a policy in-house to allow for this, wouldn't a simple statute that says reimbursement for performance-related services may be provided, and somehow some type of flexibility there, but putting very specifically in statute some of these salaries, and then the moving expenses piece. I just, and then the repayment, I actually not sure if that's completely lawful or how that would work logistically in the event that the employee left within 2 years. I practice in employment law quite a bit and just have concerns about some of these provisions, the prudence about them being in statute as opposed to policy, or a contract. Can I hear a little bit more about that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, I think in the end, I was also a little puzzled as to why the limits were placed in statute. In previous renditions, they'd always been contained in our budget footnote, which got regular review as part of the budget process. But the Capital and Finance Committee wanted to go in a different direction. Why these things are in statute and not just in kind of a policy. Maybe that's a discussion for a future day. It seems to me that the legislature, this is still a fairly new program with performance comp and paying competitive wages. I recited some bad news from the great financial crisis, but back in 2008, we did not have an investment team. We did not have a chief investment officer. And that resulted in bad performance, I think. So this, in the scheme of things, having an investment team, having performance pay, and achieving these good results, it's all fairly recent in the scheme of things. And I think the legislature has just wanted to move more cautiously than just putting into policy and allowing more flexibility. I think with continued success, maybe that will come.
Mr. Chairman.
If I may, Senator Nethercott, I was new on Cap Fin, and this was new. And they wanted to tread very cautiously into this area of creating these larger investment teams and going to pay for performance. So I think the committee decided they wanted to baked into statute so that they could know for sure they were going to monitor it and monitor any changes. They didn't want to come back later and find out that somehow it had gotten away from them in terms of what they'd originally expected. So I think he's right. At some point, we may want to revisit that, but yeah, there's some of the other members of CapFin that were there when they started the design of this could probably give you more insight than me. I was a newbie.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I recognize that, but just because so I'm just questioning the wisdom of this, regardless of the reasons why.
Mhm.
I don't think it's wise to put this in statute, period. And I know we want that control. There may be another mechanism to do that, to provide that oversight with still providing the ability to do this compensation, because I hear the need, recognize the wisdom of doing that. 100% on board with that. It's the specificity of this in statute. I think that that's not prudent. So it's really just the legalities associated with that. Then the precedent that we're setting for other legislators for wanting to put in statute every department's list of employees and their appropriate salaries and moving expenses and, reimbursement payments for a failure to stay for longer than the 2-year period. That is unwise. We're putting this in the green books, not, we don't do contracting for these agencies. So that's my piece. And so curious to hear maybe from Ms. Williams, her thoughts about providing that necessary authorization to achieve what the office wants to achieve, what CapFin has also supported, but without this type of prescriptive legislating.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Dawn Williams, Deputy State Treasurer, and thank you, Senator Nethercott. We agree that I understand what the impetus was before putting this in the budget foot. It used to be, as Director Swindell said, in a budget footnote, which was even less than ideal because, as you know, the term of the budget is only 2 years. And so I think that the idea was to, if it was going to be in session law, then it ought to be in the statute. And that is part of the problem, that why these folks haven't had a raise since 2017, because the scrutiny that goes along with changing anything in the statute is intense, which it should be. But is this really appropriate for that? Again, that's really not our call. We of course would prefer that we not have to do this, but we're happy to come and defend what we believe is important about it. But I think there's also a problem with leaving it in the hands of the A&I because we have struggled. There is no flexibility there. We have more flexibility. We have more flexibility with you, I think, sometimes than we do with A&I. The rules are very prescriptive. And there are, and I would say that when this amendment was added about the $10,000 moving expenses, that there was a 2-year requirement. There are such similar requirements like that in the personnel rules for if you provide education reimbursement to an employee, and then they sort of owe you 2 years of employment. You can't just get your education paid for and leave. So I think that might have been some of what that some precedent for that kind of thinking. But to your point, Senator, it's not ideal for us either. And again, as Director Swindell said, that's really we don't have any control over that. That's a policy decision for you all.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So what I am looking for to evaluate is language that would statutorily authorize you to provide that type of compensation, which would be an exception to A&I's policies associated with employee compensation, but without being this prescriptive. Those are my thoughts. And Mr. Chairman, for clarity, are we the original committee for this, or are we just looking at the fiscal
We're
note?
the home committee for this.
Okay. So working the bill here is not inappropriate.
So are you looking at the amendment language? Did you want to run an amendment on the floor?
Potentially, but don't want to do anything.
So would one of you draft something to get it to Senator Nethercott? Senator Guru?
Thank you. I understand where you're going with this. But just when you said that last part about writing a statute that takes it out of A&I's hands and puts it in those hands, I see the same problem that you articulated with other departments, that we're going to have a rush to the window and saying, I want that one. I want one of those. And so that's I think that was part of the dilemma we talked about as now is we're starting to have this conversation. The conversation of how it got into statute in the first place is now starting to come back in full measure, so.
Can I respond to that, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
please.
to provide some concern? I want to make it clear that I believe A&I serves a very critical and important role in protecting the state and employee compensation. I have no desire nor will an amendment take the treasurer's office out of the purview of A&I. Recognizing that these investment officers are a different type of employee classification, that there was an exception that we can also put into the statute explaining some of that rationale, either in a legislative intent, session law type situation, but allowing for this flex compensation consideration for performance related to this very unique employee position. Most employees of the state are not responsible for this type of duty. And so it is a unique skill that requires a different set of operating standards. So that, I just want to make sure there's clear that there's no intention to take the treasurer's office out of A&I.
Senator Grew.
Mr. Chairman,
I think Senator Grew had something. Okay,
Mr. Chairman, yes, and we all stipulate that about A&I. We love A&I. That's great. Tricia, if you're listening, we love you. But yeah, I'll look forward to seeing that language. But like I say, that was a lot of the conversation that we did have in the beginning about how we ended up where we ended up. And I agree with your concerns about having that stuff baked into the statute. So we'll take a look.
so tactically, I think if that amendment is to be run, it would be run first. And then if that passes, the rest of this becomes moot. So now I'd like to turn my attention back to what we've got in the bill, and because we have to sell it on the floor. So the last bullet point that I have is 2008, we did not have an investment team or a CIO and we paid dearly. What happened? I know there was a downturn. Did we downturn worse than other funds?
yes, about 3% more than median,
Okay,
and we didn't recover as fast.
and 3% worse, meaning 33%. We had a dive of
We went down 30%.
38,
And the median fund went down 26.9,
38% or 20?
30.
Oh, 30. Okay,
Lost 30%.
and the median was
26.9.
0.9. Okay, thank you.
And I suppose the other thing is we didn't recover as fast. There's another 2% delta just 2 years later. But to some of the discussions, the requirement on the 2-year or you have to pay back the moving allowance was an amendment on the House. It is a little steep, although it's not uncommon for a move to be reimbursed by an employee that doesn't stay in the location for a year. 2 years is a little steep, but 1 year is not that uncommon. With regard to the policy situation, I suppose in a better world, what you would do is you would simply say the investment operation will be financed as a percentage of assets. Say the median cost in the United States for pure funds is 10 basis points of assets. We're going to be 20% cheaper. We'll set it at 8 basis points. That's your budget. Retirement board, go forth. And they would set the compensation and they would pay the bonuses out of that with that dollar cap. And you would delegate the details to the retirement board that can look into this in detail. And it would allow more flexibility to pay a certain person maybe more money than the classification allowed because they happen to be a really good analyst and we wanted to retain them. That's your future chief.
And Mr. Swindell, did you have data on how many funds actually do it that way? Just pay, a certain number of bips and they budget out of it. Do you know?
I saw a survey from the National Association of State Retirement Administrators that indicated that about a third of public pensions had that sort of flexibility.
Okay, if you get
Either
that
a basis point or just a flat dollar amount, and then the retirement board handle the details
If you get that.
for either the entire system or more narrowly for the investment.
If you'd get that information to Senator Nethercott, it'd be appreciated, and the rest of the committee as well. So let me ask you one question about the moving expense. How does this differ from what is available to all state employees in terms of moving expense, or do we not have a moving expense policy? We do? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, not for state employees, for their, when the five statewide elected officials are elected, there is a footnote that you routinely add to pay up to $10,000 for moving expenses for those folks. It's one-time money and it's for the 5 electeds. We don't have a moving reimbursement. We don't have that option right now.
Okay. Does A&I have the ability to draft that?
I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman.
I think so.
Okay. All right,
I know
so
we don't
Ms.
have.
Williams, you go ahead with your presentation then. Let's, because we got to step it up here.
Yep,
We're
Mr.
gonna run
Chairman,
out of
thank
clock.
Yep. So I just want to add, as far as this bill, Director Swindell laid it out very well. As for how it relates to the treasurer's, one benefit of having A&I involved is that, so then if the two, and I don't mean to, we would love to be able to set our own salaries and let that happen. But if you start having the investment professionals be compensation determined by the board of the WRS, and then you have the salaries for the treasurer's office be set by IFC, then you have that that issue of not potentially not maintaining comparable compensation for the same type of work.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please, Senator Nethercott.
what if we put a directive in statute that says they will be comparable and both boards will strive to achieve equity for similar performances? There's ways around that.
You bet. Okay. So as for your points for on the floor, this treasurer's office is similar, and I do have Patrick Fleming here who would love to, he's online, sorry, he's not here physically. But some notes I would make. The fact is just to say that these folks, because of this, the way their salaries are set, they haven't had a raise since 2017. They're not eligible for the raises that the remainder of the state employees received last summer. And there's been a little bit of, they are high value, high dollar positions, and we do pay about 1/3 of what other sovereign wealth funds do, which is comparable to the pensions. Again, 50%, about 50%. With their performance compensation, which is incredibly less than their worth. We did lose an investment professional, our private equity professional, senior investment officer, he's 3 times as much money he can make just in base salary. And that's routine. Our guys get called routinely for to consider other positions. But they like what they do, fortunately for us, but that doesn't mean that they want to, that they don't feel like they should be treated similarly to other state employees who have received raises. This 20% increase that's proposed in the base salary is less than what inflation has been since 2017. The Federal Reserve economic data that's spread since June of 2017, Western states inflation has increased by 23.2%. And nationally, it's been 21%. We're just asking for the 20%. Patrick will talk to you about alpha. Alpha is the amount of money that's created over their benchmark, and the benchmark is that level that they have to reach that we were talking about before with performance compensation. So each of our employees, we have 8 folks currently. We have 10 folks that we are authorized, but we only have 8 of them filled right now. And those 8 folks generated almost $21 million each over the alpha. So their worth to our organization and to the state of Wyoming is invaluable, really. The amount of salaries that we pay our 8 people is less than 0.0006% of our assets under management of $25 billion. So while it is a lot of money and these individual salaries are so huge compared to the rest of us, as a percentage of what they're responsible for, it's negligible. And so these are the kinds of things that are meaningful to me and hopefully meaningful to you. And before I take too much time, if you wouldn't mind, could we just have Patrick just jump on?
And before he does, I'm going to tell both of you, I'm going to ask both of you. I need one page with these bullets that you've raised, and if you can parallel it, don't put too much there. But I haven't heard anything about performance like Swindell had.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. for
Okay.
asking.
And then I know they're going to want to see what this, you said 50% is on performance comp. I'm not seeing that in the statute.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, what I was saying is their total compensation for the folks that work in the treasurer's office, their total their total compensation, including performance and base salary, is about 50% of what their peers are.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, that
Okay. Patrick, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Patrick Fleming. I'm CIO for the Treasurer's Office. Yes, I would just like to comment, add on to what Don had mentioned. And, just start off with the importance of the money that we earn. We're anywhere from, 25 to a third of the state budget. And so that income is extremely important to the state. And so just to take a step back of where we came from, in 2015, when I was hired, I was a single person managing $19 billion. Now we're up to 8 professional staff, and it's 25 billion. But let's just look at the performance and what happened at that time. We could go back to 1996 to 2012 and look at the alpha performance. And so that's what our bonuses are paid upon. And again, alpha is just the difference between what the benchmark is and what we're able to produce. Going back over that period, the annual alpha performance was $7.5 million from 96 to 212. If you look then when we started this program, which we were able to do by the legislature that allowed us to take money from the managers because of the fees that we were paying. And if we use that money to build out our staff, we would then cut our fees. And with that fee savings, 50 cents on the dollar up to 3 million, we were able to build out the staff. So for those of you that weren't familiar of how we did this, that was how the deal was set up. Since that time, let's look at the performance and what happened. So 7 years ago, our average annual alpha performance was $44 million. Then 5-year performance is 68. 3-year performance, $119 million. And last year, the 1-year performance was $166 million. So the trend, we're moving in the right direction, and hopefully we'll be able to continue on with that. But I definitely want to state that it is very difficult to produce the alpha, and I guarantee we will not produce it year in and year out. So it doesn't always happen, but we're on the right trend. And how we were able to do that is with these people. These people are extremely important to us. So what we did is we looked at it and say, okay, well, if we're paying, slightly under 1.5 million in fees, our external managers, we're paying $119 million. So what we wanted to do is bring in that in-house Wyoming expertise with Wyoming people to develop this staff that people wanted to stay here, live and work in Wyoming, and produce this, these alpha numbers that we have. We have 3 PhDs on our staff now, 3 with advanced degrees. It is a real asset management firm. And my concern is, as Don mentioned, when we do lose someone, Matt was able to get, 3 times the salary to move away. So it's very difficult to keep people. But as long as we're in the ballpark, we're not asking to be on the high end. All we want to do is be fair, so these people do not leave. Because if we lose them, we don't have the staff. It'll take 3 years for me to train some of these analysts, and we just don't have that ability. We need to keep our people so they don't leave. So when you're looking at the overall picture of what we're trying to do, we're saying if we're in the ballpark, we will be able to keep the staff. Hopefully that's the plan. We'll be able to produce the alpha to generate more income from the state. Because when I talk about the basis points, 100 basis points in 1%, right? Every single basis point is $2.5 million. It is a significant amount of money. And that's what we're focusing on is every one of these little basis points, they add up. And if we can do that, we can just add more money to the state's coffers. But it will be very difficult if we lose people. We right now have positions for 2 more positions, and it's just difficult. We can't find those people. It's very difficult to even bring them to the state. We finally found one person to come and join us in March. That was, you know, almost about a year, and we're still open with another one, which has been over a year, trying to find an individual. So it's not like we can just bring people in anytime we want. That's how difficult it is. So with that, I'll stand for any questions if you have any for me.
Questions for Mr. Fleming? Yes, Senator Salazar.
So I guess my question is, you know, performance salaries. And if going back to the question I had, why the 20% increase in the base pay if they have the ability to make so much more with the performance salary? I mean, I think that's going to be a question on the floor.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Salazar, the one main component on that, I think, as Deputy Williams mentioned, is we're just asking to be, you know, the equivalent of inflation. And so that's the big part of it, is we know that we're not going to do the bonuses every year, but, you know, just to try and get us back to where we were before. The most recent increases that the state government paid to their employees, we did not participate in that. We were excluded from that. So that's really the genesis of it, is just to try and get us back up on an inflation adjusted back to, you know, close to where other people are.
Anything else for Mr. Fleming? You want to be careful you don't talk yourself out of a sale. Anything else?
I was just going to help Ms. Senator.
Okay,
Salazar.
go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator Salazar, the performance compensation is based on the base salary. And they only get paid 25% in the first year, 25%. So they don't get 100% of their performance compensation in the year that they earn it. And the other point is, to what Patrick said, is you might not get a bonus. You might not earn a performance bonus. And so the base salary needs to be at a level that is commensurate with their experience and contribution.
Okay. I'm going to leave it to you to put some exhibits together in KISS. I don't want to say alpha on the floor. You'd better come up with some, like performance.
Mr. Chairman, we'll do that. We
performance
did that for,
performance beyond the benchmark or something. I'm not going to say alpha. I don't want to explain it.
we did that for Representative Nicholas. He did a superb job as he worked this on the House floor. He walked behind you with a coffee cup a few minutes ago. I thought I'd recognize him. He did a good job.
If it says alpha, I'm going to have Guru present it.
And finally, Mr. Chairman, I think we do need to move on, but I would say I'm a little leery of, you know, this bill is progress. It's not perfection. And these topics of how we best ought to structure performance compensation and total compensation for both Treasury and retirement have been and will be a continuing conversation with the legislature.
Thank you, Senator Guru, and then Senator Nethercott.
Mr. Chairman, in response to my amendment, I would like you to think about that and work on it. If it's not prudent to do, because this has been so delicately danced, I have no intention of trying to disrupt that. It is my advice to do what I say.
And I can't respond one way or the other. I can see it flying. I don't know. Senator Guru.
I guess what I would say at this point, and you know, to the good senators down the road here, points, you know, we just have to keep in mind, and this is one of the 25, 30 largest sovereign wealth funds on the planet that we're operating here. This is out. I mean, saying outside the box is actually doesn't do it justice. What these people do and what we've been able to do, what the cost savings. You almost have to, you know, and it's hard to get this out on the floor, but where we were, you know, 10 years ago, as far as what we were paying to New York, to firms back east to do this job, And what we're paying today is a fraction. And if you've never been over to the shop over there, I suggest you go and you can see it is a world-class trading floor on the second, whatever floor it is there over there in the Hirschler. And to see what they're doing. So my suggestion right now would be to try our best to shepherd this through. And then as an interim topic for this group, go back, because I think we've heard some interesting plans there. I kind of like the idea of trying to get something to show how singularly different what you both in the retirement and in the investment side is, to be able to compensate it in a way so we can kind of be able to tell folks, the rest of the employees, the rest of the staff, this is why we're doing this and this is how we're doing it. And it's not saying you're better or they're better or this, it's just the dollars that are being used. And so keeping it simple, I understand the chairman's point. And I make all those points because I have to go to another meeting and I left a proxy.
Senator Grew, thank you. One other thing, this plan was vetted through the Investment Funds Committee. And so if you can give me just briefly the bios. I mean, if that comes up, I want them to know that, you know, we had outside scrutiny by experts on this plan. You'll send that over to me.
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
'Cause
happy to do
it's
that.
not
However,
it's
it's not
not
going
the
to fit on
IFC
one
we had.
page.
It's not the IFC. It's not the IFC we have now. It was prior IFC.
And Mr. Chairman, what do you
Memberships
mean the
changed.
vetted, the salaries?
No, the whole plan.
Oh, the performance compensation plan.
Yeah, the whole performance comp.
Oh,
plan
that
went-
back to 2017 and 19.
Yeah, it went through the IFC we then.
Of
had.
course. Yes, and through the legislature, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to, if it comes up, I want to give them some degree of comfort that this is not just a bunch of legislators whipping this up. Okay, I'll close agency comment, public comment. Public comment, closing comment, it's to the committee. Second, discussion. Clerk, call the roll.
Senator Anderson. Senator Carew voted aye. Senator Nethercott. Senator Salzar. And Chairman Kinsky.
Aye. Do we want to leave it open for Jim? Okay. Let's go ahead and close that vote out.
Yep, 3 ayes, 1 no.
I'll send it out to the floor, but we're gonna hold posting it until we feel comfortable that we've got what we need to present it. So it's to you. And it's a House bill, so we've got time. Thank you. And then have the attorneys prepare this as a committee of the whole amendment number 1. And just put the ayes names on it. Is that okay, Tara? Yeah, it's a date change. All right, so now we have. Sure. You want to move the amendment? Do we have a proxy from Guru on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, he has a due pass as amended.
Okay, I'll move the amendment.
Second.
Call the roll. Oh, no, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. No?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the only amendment is what was provided by
LSO.
LSO.
Yeah, it's a change of date from 2025 to 2024.
So this is amended.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
As amended.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we have Senator Hutchings here. And so I'm going to skip over the 2 committee bills and pick up a Senate file because that's a little more time sensitive. And so Senator Hutchings, just to walk you through a little bit, we usually get just a thumbnail of the bill. Go ahead and grab a seat up here at front with the mic. We get maybe a 2 to 3 minute overview of the bill. And then our job is to look at the appropriation, if that makes sense. So this is here on a referral. Okay.
Committee, this is the first time in over 6 years I have ever had an appropriation on a bill. So I am so new at this. And just to be honest, I was not going to be here. I was going to be in bed. And I came in early to amend the bill. And so I wasn't prepared.
No, you just, all you need to do is,
Before you.
you just need to give us a brief
Well-
description of what it does.
Well,
We'll make this,
I'll be quick because I
painless
want
for
to make
you.
it painless for me.
And Mr. Chairman,
please, Senator Nethercutt.
maybe just to help the good senator too. If we vote no, all that happens is the appropriation goes away. If we vote aye, the appropriation stays there or is voted for by the committee.
All right, would you like Mr. Rude to be with me or no? I don't know.
So usually we have you present.
Okay,
Then we go to agency, then we go to public comment.
roger that.
All right.
All right, this bill, Wyoming Prescription Drug Transparency Act, Senate File 151, relating to insurance code, prohibiting specified actions by pharmacy benefit managers, allowing individuals to choose in-network retail pharmacies as specified, and then some amendments to the bill. A lot of you have heard about this last year. Let me get the fiscal notes here. What I was gonna amend on the bill that would, it's on page 11, line 9. There is appropriated $95,000. It says from the general fund. It came in to amend that to the special revenue fund within the insurance department. So with that knowledge, that was gonna be a committee of the whole amendment.
Okay.
Does that help? Does that hamper it? Did I give you enough information? Do you want more?
That helps. I mean, we're familiar with the PBM. Tell us what we have in a fiscal note is the state says it'll cost them $2.5 million a year. Maybe you can help us with that.
Well, when the state comes in and says that, they just say it. They don't really give us a lot of information why. It was mentioned that coupons, there are certain coupons you get when you go to a store or the state will receive to lower the price of an item. And they seem to think that, and this is just my opinion on what I'm hearing, that they get to use the coupons, but I was told by the pharmacies, an individual can use that coupon when they go to the pharmacy as well and receive a discount. So if you get a discount from the pharmacy, then the insurance company should not be charged as much as what is my idea of what's happening here.
So the state gets the coupons now and instead the patient could get the coupon?
No, they both can get the coupons, but the state seems to think that because the bill mentions that the patient shouldn't be restricted from mail order pharmacy
I see.
receiving their prescriptions via the mail order only. So if we say the bill passes, the patient can go either to a pharmacy with their coupons or mail order via the state insurance, they have the coupon, then seems like everybody's saving.
Okay.
And
Questions?
if I have it wrong, I'm sure I'll be correct.
Okay. Questions for Senator Hutchings from the committee? Questions from the committee? All right, Senator Hutchings. You're welcome to stay here and we'll open it up for agency comment. So you take a seat and go ahead and take a seat back and
Okay.
we'll put Mr. Rude here or whichever agency wants to comment first.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ralph Hayes. I'm the manager of the Employees and Officials Group Insurance Program. I'm here to answer any questions you might have on the fiscal note.
Senator Nethercutt.
Thank you. I see on the bottom sentence of the fiscal note. So the last sentence on the fiscal note, you have it in front of you. You can have mine. And that fiscal note, that last sentence says that there wasn't enough time to really address the personnel impacts.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that particular one doesn't apply to our program.
Okay.
I think that's more from another area. The fiscal impact we were able to provide was, of course, the impact to the coupon program we have out there, which is the $2.5 million for 2024. And what that does is, it was already testified that the moving away from the mail order pharmacy, when people start moving to their local pharmacy, what we have with the coupon program, now these are dollars that manufacturers provide to lower the cost for prescription drugs. So if you're on Humira, which is a $5,000 a month plus drug, what they will do is they will provide a significant amount to bring that cost down for the patient to less than a bottle of aspirin, like $5. Now, what happens with that, if they fill out a local pharmacy, the pharmacy gets that coupon dollars. But what we have an arrangement with our mail order facility, since they control it, what happens is the state gets a portion, the member gets a portion of that rebate, so they get their copay lowered down to like the $5. Plus, the balance of that is available through that coupon program. The state's plan gets in the form of a revenue, and
In the
that's
form
what
of what?
in form of a other revenue.
Okay,
So think of it as a rebate, which comes from the manufacturer. Now, as long as this is being done at the mail order pharmacy facility, the one, we get those dollars. But if they fill it at a local level, the member gets their share, but the state doesn't receive anything.
Senator Salazar.
I wish we had more time for this. I really do. This is such an important issue. I'd love to get into the issue of.
We have an hour.
Well, this is a big problem in my rural Senate district, particularly with small pharmacies. And you have companies such as Express Scripts that are, pulling out because they're not making money in these small pharmacies. Do you have any thoughts on that with regard to the bill being able to help some of our rural folks with the costs that they're incurring?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I do have some thoughts along those lines. Now, let me first of all let you know that the state's plan, when you're looking at independent pharmacies versus chain pharmacies, there's no incentive for members to choose a chain pharmacy over a independent pharmacy. However, we are covering roughly 38,000 members. We're all across the state. And yet only about 10.8% of our spend in our commercial plan actually goes to independent pharmacies. The bulk of it still goes to the big box stores. So you're talking about the Albertsons, the Walmarts, the Walgreens, and they have expanded across the state pretty significantly. In fact, I shared with the committee day before yesterday, Monday, in testimony, what how many locations those big box stores do have across the state. Now, the only thing we do mandate as far as prescriptions being filled on mail order basis is specialty medications, which are the real expensive, generally your injectables like the Humira as such. And roughly 30,100 scripts was almost $15,000 of our spend. So that's the only thing from our perspective that we're requiring. Otherwise, they choose whatever they want. But again, most of I see, the competition isn't so much for the PBM. It's from the chain pharmacies, for the independents. Now, one of the things we did when we went out for RFP last year, and of course, rebates and these coupon programs are an important part of our whole decision because we're trying to keep the cost down for the state, the participating entities in the membership, is having flow through of the coupons and the rebates, which saves significant dollars. But as part of that, what we did do to help the independent pharmacists, the true independents, was to increase the dispensing fees by 50% over what the previous PBM was paying. So we are aware of that disparity, and our formulary was to help them through dispensing fees. But unfortunately, this bill doesn't carve out the independent pharmacies, which is only 10.8% of our spend. It says, well, let's bring all these other chains in place. And why would I take my mail order and give it to a bunch of chains and increase their profits when it's going out of state anyway?
Senator Salazar, follow up. Senator Nethercott?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. 2 points. I can answer that. One, the previous mail order pharmacy that the state contracted with was awful. The current one is much better. So that's why. And so even the big box pharmacy in the grocery store was able to be more responsive in providing services than the horrific mail order pharmacy of the past. So that's from a member perspective, that's a big difference. But to the point of this bill, what does the state do with the revenue it receives? What kind of loss on the ground are we going to be experiencing from if this bill were to pass?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, basically, since we don't, when we get these type of revenues, we offset the premium. So we lower our premiums because we don't have to bring in as much as premium income because of this other income. So with this, we would have to increase premiums to maintain enough dollars to pay the claims by an offset. So higher premiums and higher employer contributions for our participating entities and the members.
Okay, anything else? Okay, we have a more agency comment.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Jeff Rubin, the Insurance Commissioner. We're neutral on the bill. I'd worked with both sides of this issue over the interim, and we tried to mediate, if you will, and work something out. And we came close, and a lot of that in that bill is in this bill. There are some changes. I remain neutral. I don't want to tell you if those changes are good or bad. I'll let that for the parties to do, to decide. But I wanted to be here because there is an appropriation that affects our office. I pointed out to Senator Hutchings that it does make more sense for it to be a special, for the appropriation to come from special funds with the rest of my office budget. It would be actually more difficult to administer one position out of what would be, and 26 others that come from a different pot. It's just easier. Our entire budget is special funds. We take our 2.8 million or whatever it is each year, and we divide that by the number of insurers that are in the state. It's roughly 1,200. We send them a bill and they pay it. This would be absorbed into that, which makes complete sense to me. To Senator Nethercutt's point about that last sentence in the fiscal note, I believe that was initially there when we first submitted our first fiscal note to this, because we got 5 fiscal notes the same day that need to be done end of day. And so the best I could come up with was last year's PBM bill with the workload there. Now that bill is much more robust than this bill, so it really wasn't that accurate. So then I talked with LSO and they said, hey, we've got time. If you want to refine it, do that. And so the appropriation in this bill is probably 1/3 to 1/2 of what we asked for on the bigger bill. So what we have in there is my best guesstimate is what the workload increase would be. And I think they left that last line in there from the original fiscal notes that went in, if that makes sense. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on our end of this if the committee has them.
Questions for Mr. Rood? So Mr. Rood, you know, insurance is a murky thing to me, but my understanding is 38 other states have some form of PBM regulation. You go to meetings of insurance commissioners and rub elbows in the halls, go to presentations. What have you learned about PBM regulation in other states and what we're not doing or what these other states are doing that we could be doing?
Mr. Chairman, you're absolutely correct. There's our 38 states that have some form. I think that's the correct number. I'll assume that you're correct. On that, we're one of them. I mediated the group back in 2015, and we came up with a bill registering PBMs, putting them under our control, changing some of the audits to make it easier on the small town pharmacies, that sort of thing. And so we have something on our books now. It's more than the states that have nothing. There's some states that have significant regulation on there, and they've been under litigation for the last 3 years. And it's very hard to tell you the impact of, did prices go up? Did prices go down? Were premiums increased? I mean, because a lot have stays of execution, so we don't know the true impact. And then you have insurance companies that have to project out next year's premiums based on last year's data. And so there's this lag. And so each meeting I have with the other commissioners, I always ask Arkansas, North Dakota, Oklahoma, West Virginia, a few of the other states that have some of these greater regulations. And I ask them about their workload. I ask them how many people they have in the office. I ask them, is it increasing or decreasing? And what consistently they've told me is they all need to bring people in. They all need to train them from specialists to get them up to speed on how to regulate. And that initially there's a spike in the first year or two, and then it levels off. Arkansas had, I think, they have an average of 600 complaints per year. Now, one complaint actually might involve 100 or 500 prescriptions, but it's one same complaint, just the number of drugs, prescriptions that are attached to it. Oklahoma, I think, has around 800 per year. They have more regulation there now than we do with this bill if it were to pass. And that's why my ask is a whole lot less than what they have in those states. So I hope that helps.
And so the bill that we have on the books now, doesn't it sunset or is it permanently on the books? I thought there was a sunset in it.
I believe, okay, the requirements continue. I think there is a sunset for the appropriation.
No, for our current statute, is our current statute sunsetted?
No,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, it does not.
And then let me ask you, under our current statute or under this bill, there's some of these PBMs actually pay our pharmacists below cost. Will you have the authority to do anything about that if it's true?
I mean, if that's what this statute, are you asking, Mr. Chairman, what's currently on the books or with what's going forward?
Both. If you don't have the authority currently on the books, would you under this?
I think so you're asking is if the pharmacist actually gets paid less than what's on the, it depends upon the drug because there's very complex.
Yeah.
There's a MAC list which deals with generics. And then there's all these non-generic drugs, and they're treated differently in how they're priced. And so the few complaints that we have dealt with variance of payments of very small amounts, but we have looked at them, and the very few complaints we've had, we've struggled with determining what to do, but we've rectified that. We've dealt with those complaints.
Okay. And then there's, I've read of manufacturer rebates to the PBM that incentivize the PBM to put certain drugs on the formulary that may or may not be the cheapest drugs for the patient or the state. Do you have authority to do anything about that, to look into that, to see if that's true?
Currently, I do not. Under this, I'm not certain.
Okay.
I'm just not an expert in PBM speak and ease, and unfortunately, neither is anyone in my office.
Okay. So then I have a series of other alleged PBM practices that probably it's not going to do any good to ask you.
And then throughout this process, like I said, I was able to get them in the room and we talked. I didn't say I understood everything they said,
Okay.
but when they hammered out a definition, I assume there was a reason for both sides for doing it. And so I really would leave it up to the other parties to comment on what will or will not be impacted by the bill.
So what is your understanding of what authority you have under the current bill or what authority do you have under the current bill and how would that be expanded? What authority do you have under the current statute? What's your understanding of it? And what expanded authority would you have if the bill passes?
So I think currently, we were looking at small pharmacies and some of the complaints they had. They're really small shops. So for example, a simple example would be at the beginning of the month, they are very busy filling 30-day prescription. It's payday for people. That's the days that they're the busiest of all. They didn't want to be audited by the PBMs. And so we said, well, no PBM audits within the first 10 days of the month. And if you do an audit, you got to get X number of days of notice. That's something that we did. That's an easy one to figure out. You know,
Okay.
they either come in those 10 days or they don't. So, and since they were registered with us, licensed with us, if they violated that, we have the authority to go in and say, well, this is wrong. You need to fix it. And we could fine you for your license. We wouldn't, but we could technically. But we do have authority over them. The authority over them would, because of the licensing aspects, will continue. If you look at this bill, you see that we've reworked all of the definitions. So MAC is, I mean, for example, if you look at the bill, you'll see a lot of red where we had some changes. If you start looking on page 6, for example, and so a lot of things changed and a lot of these definitions were expanded. And these are the things we'd be looking at. The way I envision this is I would have one person in my office. I would hire an expert to come in and train them, come up with a form, that sort of thing. The very complex complaints, we would probably farm out to a vendor. Last year, we went ahead and we established some contracts with vendors who specialize in this sort of thing in other states.
Okay.
And so they're on the books now. So we have the authority to pull them in and have them look and see if there is a violation.
Is the change in these definitions helpful to you? You said they kind of made you pull your hair out a little bit when you're sitting in the room. Is this change in definitions helpful to you?
It's a change. I mean, we have to look to the definitions for enforcement. Whether that makes it easier or harder, I really can't say.
Okay. Have you run it by some of your outside experts to see if this would make life a little bit easier in regulatory land?
I've talked with other commissioners in other states, not our vendors, but I've talked with, when I did talk to the vendors, it wasn't about this particular
Okay.
bill, but I've talked with other states who have similar provisions. We talked about mainly workload and not so much the detail of findings or things like that. One thing they pointed out, another reason, for example, it's hard to say what helps and doesn't help, is this obviously will only apply to future contracts. And so for Arkansas, I kept calling Arkansas saying, what are you seeing? And they said, well, what we're seeing is a PBM saying we're under the old contract. It hasn't expired yet, so nothing's changed. And so then that whole year goes by, and some of those contracts are multi-year contracts. And so I can't really comment very accurately on the actual impact of these things.
And maybe the contracts don't expire until the parties decide they expire.
I understand they're generally a year or two.
Okay.
Nothing indefinite. I mean, there's but obviously the new provisions would apply if they're renewed.
Is it too much to ask for you to send this off to one of the outside experts that helps you with these audits? I'd hate to pass this and then you send it to them. They said, gee, Jeff, you should have called us. You actually made it worse, not better.
Timing, well, Mr. Chairman, I would say timing would make that difficult for one to get a response back, because I know the time crunch you're all in. But I would also say that I think if you hear from both sides, the same sides that I had in the room, that if they can come to an agreement on something, I think it's for the better for all sides. They may not all be happy with it, but I believe that makes the process better when both opposing parties get together and come up with something that they can agree on. And I will assume, and maybe it's a poor assumption on my part, but I think that would be accurate, that it's a better product when they come together and they agree on something.
Thank you.
So,
Anything else for the agency? Thank you, Mr. Rood. We'll open it up to public comment. And we have somebody waiting on Zoom too.
already.
who signed up some time ago. So let's see, it's 9:23. Do you think you can each do 5 minutes?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jonathan Downing here today on behalf of PCMA Pharmaceutical Care Management Association. Speaking to the appropriation and just wanted to flag, or as far as the fiscal note impact and wanting to flag some additional issues for you. With the couple things back just as far as history. Some of you might remember Senate File 36 from last year as far as what had been another attempt to try and get some additional regulation on the books as far as related to the interactions between the employers who pay the insurance premiums to the insurance companies who contract with PBMs to try and keep the cost reasonable for those premiums and provide the services that they do to their employees. And in that context, when we met and had an interim committee earlier last year as far as corporations committee, some of those discussions from that committee had said, hey, get the industry together. And that led to having the Department of Insurance facilitate meetings between all of the stakeholders that were there. Some stakeholders were more vocal than others. At the end of it, on Election Day 2022, we had come up with a list of agreements that people were able to agree to. Not everybody got what they wanted, and there were several things left on the table. And part of that had been mainly focusing on trying to get to yes on some of the things that we could agree to, and then overcoming no with some of those other areas, which are probably familiar terms for some of you. But the point being that industry is still committed to trying to work some of these things together. Mr. Mosier was also in on some of those conversations. He has a much deeper breadth on this issue than I do. I've been dealing with it for a shorter period, but what I would flag for you and point out to you is that on our initial estimate, if you're looking at 2.5 million with employee health insurance, as far as that impact, that's about $167 per state employee. If you're talking 15,000 total state employees in that plan type of approach, and I can't remember what the exact number of state employees are. I'm
I
just
think
good
you
at that.
said 38,000 on the plan.
So total on the plan, then, just we can do the math a little bit later, but end of the day, it's still going to be an increased cost. It's either going to be borne by the employees or by the plan. And that's a choice as far as how that is, as far as voting moving forward. In terms of that impact, that also impacts the private sector. And those companies that currently have insurance plans in Wyoming that choose to offer a pharmacy benefit to their employees are also going to have to bear that expense. That also will impact state or your local governments as well. And so just flagging it because we've still been doing the preliminary numbers. Our initial numbers, which will get you a little bit tighter data because we're still analyzing what was added as far as when this bill dropped. But the initial numbers were looking like at least over a 10-year period of $250 million in expense as far as looking at public and private plans by supporting this bill. And I'll follow up with a handout to the committee and also the floor later when this hits the floor. But if it's at your discretion, Mr. Chairman, if Mr. Mosier has any other comments or if there's any questions as far as some of those other areas.
Before we go to him, one question. You said that there are a series of items that you all could not agree on. Would you send a list of what those were to myself, the committee, and Senator Hutchings? I'd like to know what was left on the table.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. And
because Mr. Rude was shooting for consensus, and it doesn't take much to break consensus. You just don't agree to the stuff you don't want to agree to. And I'd like to know what was left on the table. That'd be helpful.
Definitely, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. And completely appreciate that because as far as you know, with working bills and legislation, it was a series of meetings throughout the summer. And we're okay for more meetings, of course, but it took quite a bit of time to get there. And then when that consensus was reached, everybody and all four of the emails and everything else that came with that.
Okay, thank you. Anything for Mr. Downing? Mr. Mosier?
Mr. Chairman, Mike Mosier, Cigna. Breadth of knowledge, I like that better than old guy. The first, and this is kind of new ground. We haven't broken in a while. The last PBM transparency bill we saw in 2008. And so Mr. Rude, Mr. Hayes, all of us are kind of trying to wrap our heads around it. Bear in mind that I was part of that working group.
Who do you
too.
represent?
Cigna, I thought I said, I'm sorry, did I say Cigna?
Yeah.
Yes.
And Cigna owns a PBM.
We do. We also work with PBMs. We have the state healthcare plan, and that's not
Okay.
our
I got
PBM.
you.
That's
Okay.
a different one. And we're involved much like Blue Cross Blue Shield because of the cost driver to the people on our insurance plans. You saw the numbers that Mr. Hayes had, just reflect that out to everybody who pays health insurance, or every business who pays health insurance in the state of Wyoming. That working group that Mr. Downing mentioned, and then there were other working groups on PBM issues in 2015, 2019, all that reached consensus language that passed the legislature. The agreed to language that Mr. Downing is going to send you was actually submitted to the LSO by the Corporations Committee Chairman, the House Corporations Committee Chairman. And then it may have a draft in there for all I know, because after that, one of the parties decided that they didn't like it. Addressing the general issue.
You lost me.
What's that?
You lost me. You completely lost me on that string of thought. You sent something to LSO because some party didn't like it.
The Joint Corporations Committee Chairman submitted the draft that Mr. Downing mentioned to the LSO.
The
Right.
draft that everybody agreed on.
Yes.
That Mr. Rude talked about.
Yes, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
and
And then one side decided that they couldn't support it after the agreed to.
so that's not the bill we have?
No, Mr. Chairman, it's not even close.
Okay,
There are some components that reflect, but on the other hand, the overall direction of the bill, no. Now quickly, we have several different bills. We've dealt with several different bills to address this issue. I haven't talked to any of you that want to help big box stores, and that's really where the bulk of pharmacy sales are happening. According to the EGI, almost 90% of their sales go to chain pharmacies. According to Blue Cross Blue Shield, I believe it's 70%. There are ways we can address legislation to grow state without growing state government. We can address dispensing fees for independents. We can address rural pharmacies as rural healthcare. There's a myriad of different ways that states approach this. I'm hesitant to grow state government and raise everybody's health insurance costs before we look at the idea of how else we can address this issue. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to get into the weeds on this, but there are solutions. This is not the solution in our opinion. And with that, I will take any questions.
all right, thank you. Questions for Mr. Moser? Okay, thank you. We have somebody on Zoom, public comment.
Chairman Kinsky, we have Matthew Meyer that's raised his hand.
Okay. Go ahead and, I don't know what you do. You let him in or something?
I will let him in.
You hit a button. Good morning. I just need your name, rank, and serial number, and then away you go.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Matthew Meyer. I am an independent pharmacist here in Sheridan, Wyoming, and here to talk about Senate File 151. Preparing on the appropriations of the bill. We do not believe that the additional costs proposed by Mr. Hayes are accurate. Many of the drug costs of that 2.5 million, since they are dealing entirely with specialty, they're not even available they're what's called a limited distribution network and not even available for order or sale at retail pharmacies. So they're going to continue to be filled at mail order through traditional means as they are anyway. And then also, there's this assumption that mail order means cheaper. We have obviously several examples, one including in the state of Oklahoma, to where, the mail order pharmacies were being charged, or the PBM through its own affiliated mail order pharmacy was charging 10 times that of of what the PBM was reimbursing at community retail pharmacies. So again, just the assumption that something is going over through mail order does not necessarily mean, especially when it's owned and there's no regulations on the conflicts of interest of these business practices, that cheaper is actually what you're going to get. In terms of the coupon program that Mr. Hayes has been bringing up, the pharmacies have no control over the coupon programs. Those coupon programs, which we process, which we are able to process through coupons or e-vouchers, any other process, that is an agreement between the PBM, the drug manufacturers, and in this case, the employer, the state. So that could be set for additional pharmacies on the few limited medications that might transfer over to community retail pharmacies. That can be set so that it's not changing. The pharmacy has no directive over where that's going to happen. Since there's been some questions on what Senate File 151 addresses, really the bulk of Senate File 151 addresses charging community pharmacies additional claims networking fees, prohibiting that practice by the PBMs to increase their own internal profits, routinely reduce pharmacy reimbursements after the point of sale. So this is where we get into clawbacks on effective rate contracting, where where pharmacies, both chains and independents, are being told at the point of sale, you're going to be reimbursed X. And weeks to months later, they're coming back and saying, no, actually, we're going to recoup some of those costs. And this is a clawback, not an audit, not a recuperation. We are going to claw back some of those reimbursements to you because of some clause in the contract regarding the effective rate of the payment. Senate File 151 prohibits restricting Wyoming citizens' right from receiving care at any in-network pharmacy. Again, that's not any pharmacy in the state, that's any in-network pharmacy, including their own community pharmacies. It prohibits the paying of a PBM owned or affiliated pharmacy more for the exact same services as, can we shut that off? Thanks. So I'm sorry about that, committee. Paying PBM owned and affiliated pharmacies more for the same services as a community pharmacy, prohibiting a PBM from billing an insurance company a larger payment than that is paid to the pharmacy for any prescription service, prevents a PBM from restricting a pharmacy from viewing access to their own current PBM contracts, and requires audit appeals reporting to the Wyoming Department of Insurance and transparency to the PBM drug acquisition cost pricing on any appealed medication. That's kind of a brief overview of the bill, why we disagree with the appropriation, and at this point, I will stand for questions.
Questions, committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
that your comment on in-network, that was one of the problems that I have heard on this from pharmacists, that maybe they're not in network and then their reimbursement is different. Is that true, or is there something to that?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, which senator asked the question?
That's Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, to answer that question, that's a little bit harder question to answer. So there's in-network and then there's limited networks. So in our case, with one of the PBMs, we are in their network. Okay, but we have PBM contractual language that states even though we are in the network, the PBM or the plan sponsor can pick and choose which pharmacies that are in network are allowed to participate in the basically where a patient can fill their medication. So you can be in contract, in network, and still be excluded from a patient's insurance, from their drug benefits. In terms of reimbursements, there are several different tiers of contracting. There's standard rate, there's preferred rate, and there's mail order rates. Again, Senate File 151 doesn't address standard or preferred or the reimbursement rates, other than saying that the PBM cannot pay their own or affiliated pharmacies at a greater rate than they're paying any network pharmacy. Does that answer your question, Mr. Senator?
Okay, further questions for Mr. Meyer? Anything else for Mr. Meyer? Mr. Meyer, your first point when you led off about the bill, you went so fast I couldn't get it. You said it prohibits what?
Oh, I'm sorry. Going back to the overview, charging community pharmacies additional claims or network fees. So one of the tactics that PBMs use to generate additional profits, in addition to being paid an administration fee to run the network by the insurer, so they're being paid to do this, they will have an additional fee at each pharmacy every time that they submit a claim. So every time I submit a claim through to the insurance, whether it's to get a paid claim, reverse that claim because the patient didn't pick it up, to check a price, they're charging us transaction fees to use the network. So Senate File 151 would prohibit those transaction fees from occurring.
Now go down to the last 2 points because you went too fast there. It prohibits something contracts. I got that much. Prohibits.
Sure. Prohibits a PBM from billing an insurance company a larger payment than that paid to the pharmacy for any prescription service.
I got that one. After that, you had something about contracts.
Restricting a pharmacy from viewing access to their current PBM contract.
You have a contract and they won't let you look at it?
They can have language if the pharmacy is utilizing a PSAO or Pharmacy Services Administration Organization. They can have contractual language in there preventing the PSAO from handing over the entire contract to the pharmacy member.
I see. Even though you're subject to the contract, you don't get to see it.
Correct.
Okay, and then the last one, I got transparency costs something.
Requires audits, appeals reporting to the Wyoming Department of Insurance, and transparency to PBM drug acquisition pricing methods on any appealed medication. So one of the problems with current statute right now is on an appealed MAC list item, the PBM is supposed to present the pharmacy with the NDC number for the medication that they have on their MAC list that can be acquired by the pharmacy at a lesser cost than the pharmacy submitted on their appeal. Giving me an NDC number and not where the medication is acquired does not help me, because every different wholesaler may have the same NDC listed at a different price depending on their contract with where they acquired that medication. It also doesn't guarantee that wholesale company is even authorized to ship to Wyoming. So we can have PBM practices where they are pulling medication price points for medications that we can't even get.
Okay, that's helpful. I didn't get those. I just wanted to make sure that I got those bullet
Yes, sir.
points. Because it is, I mean, we're in a different land when we get in this language here. So
Absolutely, sir. It's different than medical insurance. It's different from every other industry I've ever seen.
okay, anything else from Mr. Meyer? Anything? Any further public comment? All right, I'll close public comment.
Thank you very much.
Anything closing, Senator Hutchings? Please. We're just looking at this $2.5 million so-called appropriation.
Right, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Some of the testimony you heard today, I've never heard. Yes, it's the $250 million increase over 10 years never came out in our committee. I've never seen a document on that, and I'm readily available. I think what has happened with some of the testimony is this is what I would call those floaters in the punch bowl. Let's get you off of what we're really trying to do. We're trying to regulate what the PBMs are doing to the pharmacists and to our citizens. Again, Mr. Meyer brought up a very good point that the medicines that we're talking about mailing in are specialty, and you'll keep doing that. So there won't be any real reduction in our revenues. And it's kind of nice to know that that part is happening, that there will be a revenue savings in my eyes if a patient uses a coupon at their pharmacist of their choosing. That will reduce the cost, so the insurance company should not bear the cost. If the insurance company uses that coupon, then they'll have a savings and they can use that. We can benefit from that cost. If this gets to the floor, I will make sure you guys get a copy of this document here. It's really, really tiny read on all of the 50 states that have passed legislation. The legislation here is not new. It has been done in other states, and we'll explain to you which states the legislation came from. So you'll know that this is what's going on across our country, and we need to pass SF 151 to help our local pharmacists, period.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
Senator
you.
Hutchings. Appreciate it. Okay, it's to the committee. I'll move the bill. It's been moved and second. Discussion? Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Senator Anderson,
Aye.
Senator Guru submitted as vote to aye. Senator Nethercutt, Senator Salzar, and Chairman Kinsky.
Aye. Thank you, Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, members of the committee. I really appreciate my burden dealing with.
We hope it was painless. All right, that was our aspiration. Before we go on to anything else, committee, we forgot to talk about who is going to carry. I know we'll back up whoever it is, who is going to carry 24 state investments, compensation, and relocation amendments. Tara, are you and I the only two on CapFin? Is Guru on CapFin? Okay. All right, then I'll back you up. Okay, we have a pile of paper here. That's what we have. We finished those. HB3 was pushed to next week. Online sports wagering amendments. The only person that understands that is Senator Guru, unless you understand it. I think we're gonna have to wait till we have Mike. And then legislator constituent service allowance, management council. That's, pardon? Okay. I wasn't in on any of those discussions. Can you just give us an idea what's happening?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think that there was a request from legislators to increase the constituent service allowance in order to defray the costs associated with what we do. So that allowance is proposed to be increased from $750 to $1,000 per calendar quarter.
Okay,
So just a $250 increase, I think, to represent the increased costs of postage and our stationery and those types of constituent services is what this contemplates. You get your package of letterhead and envelopes that costs money to get the postage, and this allows for those expenditures.
all right. Agency comment? Public comment? Closed comment? I'm just following the script. It's to the committee. Move the bill. Move in second. Discussion.
Which one are you on?
We are on constituent allowance, changing it from 750 to 1,000. Clerk, call the roll.
Senator Anderson.
Aye.
Senator Grew has submitted a do pass. Senator Nethercott, Senator Salzar, and Chairman Kinsky.
Aye. Okay, let's see where we are. The first four, 130, I'm looking at our list of bills. Senators, 133, 153, 138, and 107, we passed out. 03, we pushed to next week. 24, we took care of. Constituent allowance, we took care of. And online sports wagering, I think we're gonna have to push that to next week. Do we have Mike here? And then drug transparency, we took care of. So let's talk about when we, anything else for the committee before we close? Okay, go ahead and close. We adjourn. We're adjourned. Meeting next week.